Right. So when I asked you to do this podcast and I told you the movie, you replied by saying it's your 11th favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme film.
Can you run down the top 10? Do you know them?
I don't off the top of my head, but I could tell you that literally almost everything up to including Double Team, Knockoff, and Sudden Death are all ahead of Quest in Death Warrant, Double Impact, Hard Target. These are all these are some
Universal Soldier 1 and 2?
Universal Soldier 1 and 2, Cyborg, the precursor.
Street Fighter.
Street Fighter was a bad movie.
Yeah.
All these other movies,
really?
when I was a kid, though, all these other movies weren't bad to me.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? But I think this movie that we're about to talk about was like, for me, seeing my dad cry for the first time and undid. Like, I was like, oh, maybe he's not good in anything.
Yeah.
Well, this is an interesting movie because there is something really amazing about Bloodsport, and we just talked about it a bunch, and we didn't get to hear June's opinion on Bloodsport, but you can maybe share some of it today. But it was great because it's like the height of everything. But now this is kind of, and I was thinking about this on the way over, this is like Jean-Claude Van Damme's independent movie. Like, it's like he's making choices here. He's directing it.
Poorly. Poorly, I might add.
He is teamed up with Frank Dukes, and if you haven't read the article on Frank Dukes on Slash Film, it will blow your mind. But Frank Dukes, again, to write this story, but it takes away all the fun of Van Damme, but then replaces it with like acting Van Damme.
It takes everything that you liked about Bloodsport. This is the Dumb and Dumberer of Bloodsport. Like, it takes everything you liked about the original and waters it down and makes it's so like it's so repetitive. It's so similar to Bloodsport, but so worse. Like it's not ratcheted up in any way.
Well, yeah, you would think the move would be like, okay, that worked. So let's take that and let's add this other thing and make it even better. No, let's subtract a lot of the interesting stuff, the splits, the buns. There
were no buns.
There was no buns.
I thought the buns were.
There's no splits.
I was glad there weren't any splits. I learned something about myself watching Bloodsport, which is I'm very uncomfortable, and I'm looking at this, don't worry, but I'm very uncomfortable seeing a man in a split.
Really?
It does something to my insides where I feel like, stop.
You have to turn away when Paul is doing his
when I'm practicing in the morning.
That amount of flexibility in a man, I don't like to see.
Really?
You would like your men to be unable to stretch very well?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this.
Now, Paul has no flexibility in his legs.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we've heard the electric sexuality that is between you.
His legs are like...
We don't have to get into my flexibility in this podcast. Yes, I don't have great flexibility.
We'll have pictures of Paul's legs in the show notes.
That's why I will show you.
We've worked out together a bunch, and the trainers are shocked that he has zero flexibility.
Well, that's why we don't do...
He has tree trunk legs. Like, they don't give. They don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I will say this is why we don't do video podcasts, is because none of Paul's joints are flexible.
No, I am
Paul
standing.
stands, he's leaning against the wall at like a 45-degree angle.
My legs are the size of Groot's. I have 2 Groot's for legs, and it's very difficult.
I don't know what it is, but seeing a man in splits like that for so long, and it's interesting too because I do like male gymnasts. I think that's a nice physique, and I can appreciate that. But seeing him in splits was so upsetting to me. So I personally was happy that there weren't any splits.
But let me ask you this,
June. Oh, sorry.
Do you mind if you were to be in a yoga class or something, and a guy was to show himself to be very flexible? Would you find that unattractive?
If I'm going to be very honest,
I would ask you be only honest.
I don't. Again, I realized it watching
a symbol of a healthy body, the flexibility of one's joints, and you are like, no, thank you, barf.
In a man, yes. I don't.
June, you're old
school. Love it.
That's old school.
I think that's
you're
just
more
not
of a
how
Jim
I like
Varney
my
gal.
men.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this: What if? What if he's very?
I don't know why they're so flexible.
You don't know why.
I don't know why.
You don't know what has transpired.
I don't know why they're spending their time getting that flexible.
Yeah.
But I don't like it.
It's the sign of a wasted life or a man not providing if he can be that flexible. He's like clearly just working on himself.
By the way, maybe it's a primitive thing where I'm like, what's going on in your groins? Like, are you, what is happening to your
Is
seed?
your problem...
Like, I don't know.
Is your problem that you find flexibility to be feminine, or you're worried they're hurting their dick and balls?
I think maybe a little bit of both.
Interesting.
It's like puts you in a very weak, terrifying position to be that open.
Yeah.
Like your taint is completely like that. It's just you're smashing it onto the ground.
Well, and I always think about how your balls feel, because your balls at that point are hitting the ground. But before your leg,
yours would.
Yeah, mine, yeah. But like, as you're going down, like, well, I guess if you're not doing it on the ground, he's always on chairs.
I'm assuming. Well, no, he does it on the ground too.
But then you sort of sit on your.
You know, I've stretched Paul out a number of times.
I don't know why.
Please continue.
I don't know why my flexibility is on trial here. This is not a show about how did this get stretched. Is our spin-off show on Hal, and it's all.